was my first introduction to telly, and I discovered telly's really tatty, because I came up to film the studio bits, the studio piece to cameras, and I was expecting, I don't know, it's telly, right? I'd never done it, so I was expecting BBC and studios and lights and stuff. It was the basement under screen time and a white plastic chair from the warehouse and a bit of black velvet. And I remember thinking, And then you learn that basically telly is tatty, but people are, DOP and lighting people are very clever at making tatty look amazing. And the show was interesting. I mean, psychology is an incredibly conservative profession, and for a long time, I think they thought I was a bad thing, and there were lots of people that disapproved of that series. But I had some really clear rules right from the beginning, which is that we wouldn't make an episode unless the family consent. We had to explain it to them first, and we wouldn't do recreations and do all that graphic, awful stuff. And screen time were great. Like Philly's fantastic, and screen time were great, and they were on board. They wanted to make the thing kind of ethically and responsibly as well. So it was a really good series, and we did some good things, and lots of really good things come out of it. I know firsthand and secondhand that I have colleagues in my old profession now who disapprove, and I don't give a shit. I was doing these parenting talks and thought, you could make a TV show about this stuff, and you could kind of start with the live show and do some things of it. So I just kind of rang Mark and I said, I've got a thing. And so the title, he liked the title for a start, and then it just kicked off from there, and they kind of did quite well. I think it kind of made a big splash because up until then everybody had been earnest and nice, and I was kind of saying, just let's be a little bit more honest. Like, sometimes we yell at our kids, sometimes we get angry, sometimes we're a bit shit, and that's actually fine. And so I think because no one else had really been saying that, certainly not on TV. Sovereign Insurance came to me and said, would you like to go to Christchurch and we'll pay the costs and go down and do some talks to help people out. And I'm always kind of thinking, well, how can we do stuff bigger? Because if I do half a dozen little talks in Christchurch, then there's only the people who come can go. And so I went back to Sovereign and said, well, okay, how about you give us a lot more money, and we go and we make a documentary about it, and we include some of the talk stuff, and we include some experts, interviews with experts, and make something that can live online and be really helpful to people. And Sovereign were fantastic. They just jumped on board straight away. And they didn't want, the big ta-da Sovereign Insurance. They wanted that kind of, they didn't want it on at all, but we kind of put some at the end stuff, So it was a really good example of a corporate who wanted to do something really helpful and really got in behind the project, and they were fantastic. They were amazing. I learned a lot of really useful things making the show, because you go and talk to scientists and researchers who spend their time looking at that stuff. And what tends to be the case is that there's amazing science and research going on. They have trouble getting that information out there in a way that's kind of palatable and that the public can understand it. So, there was some fantastic work being done in Hamilton around eye scanning and, kids what they're watching when they're driving and stuff. And that was kind of cool. And we got to put that stuff out. And it's helpful. It helps parents to understand what you should and shouldn't do with kids in driving. What I learned is that flying a helicopter along, it's pretty easy, right? So there's 5 controls, 5 separate controls. Our instructor gave us control of all 4, not the 5th one, which I think was the throttle. Flying along, easy. Hovering is insanely difficult. I managed about 1.5 seconds, literally 1.5 seconds before she had to take over and save our lives. And he could do about 3 or 4 seconds because, he's a bit more video gamey and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool. And we got to do something that, because Mark McNeil was the EP for that as well, Mark had always wanted to drop a car off a crane. It's something he'd always wanted to do, and luckily we got to do it for that day. So we had this awesome day at, I think, Waikaraka Park with the crane and some cars and just dropping them. And those are days when you're just dropping cars off cranes. You go, seriously, this is my job now, this is what I do. And I was just kind of glad that Mark finally got to drop a car, So I think if that's your sort of thing, you should get to do that at some point in your life. The most amount of criticism we got from that was actually from journalists saying, why are you doing this? You're not a journalist. To which my response is, because you're not. There are really important things that we just weren't talking about. The alcohol thing, we don't talk about. The inequality stuff, we don't talk about. So it seemed like that there were these big serious issues, and it felt like a long time since we'd had like full-on kind of serious documentaries on telly. And, you know, the great thing, one of the things I really liked about working with Mark is that he doesn't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over. Like, he wants to make good TV, and so he's happy to take risks and to do different stuff. And so with the hard stuff, we got to make these really carefully constructed, take your time to shoot them properly documentaries. And I think for the people who worked on the show, it was great because for them it felt like a long time since they'd done that, and there was almost this idea that has gone, like we don't do that anymore, but we still do, and it kind of worked, and lots of people talked about it, and so we got to do it again. I had always wanted to go to the Antarctic. At some point I suddenly thought, you know what, there could be maybe that's my way down, is to do this documentary, and I was interested in Antarctic science, and I knew that they were doing really important stuff. And again, I mean, Marcus Lush had done his documentary a few years ago, and that had done really well, and there had been a little bit of stuff coming out, but I thought it was, you know, it was kind of time to go back. When you're sitting on the Air National Guard Hercules, and you're cramped in this little seat, and it's the webbing, and it's hot and juddery and uncomfortable, but even that's awesome. Like, you're thinking, oh my God, like I'm on an Air National Guard. And then you see the iceberg, and you land, and you get out, and just, you know, moments like when we had the cold weather survival course, and you're sleeping in a little snow trench that you've dug on the Ross Ice Shelf, and you know, the next night is American night, so the Americans come over and drink at the Kiwi bar, and then whales are swimming past. So you're standing outside at midnight, watching whales swim past your front door with some slightly tipsy Americans, and it's just, oh my God, you know. So there was just skidooing across the ice, and this amazing large mammal, which is Regina Isart, who's this, which is the best name for an Antarctic scientist. She stops her skidoo and points over there, and a whale just sticks its head up and goes. You think, oh, okay, this is. It was a low character moment, but what I actually thought of when I was in my little ice trench looking out over the Ross Ice Shelf, I thought about all those, and it's not a lot, but there are some psychologists who just think I'm a dick and a menace. And I thought about them as I was sitting in my little snow trench in the Antarctic, and I thought, screw you, I'm okay with this. Poor character, but it was a nice moment. So that was a joke. So I walked into Razor Films, and you just talk shit for the first little bit when you get in. That's generally what you do. So I said, I've got this brilliant idea for a show. It's called Nigel Blows Shit Up. I'm going to go around for half an hour blowing shit up, which probably wouldn't sustain a half hour of TV. But Mark kind of liked the title, and so he talked about it for a bit and came up with the idea of science, because again, science isn't on TV, and science is freaking awesome. Like, science is amazing. And we thought, well, let's put science back on telly again. Like, and we, you know, again, our country's economy, the big changes will come from science and technology. It's not going to come from more cows. And so finding and putting kind of science back on the map is, I mean, that's kind of, for me, that's a long-term thing I'm quite interested in doing. So yeah, it just came from there. And that show was, I have to be honest, the best television I've ever made. Because in terms of, personally, in terms of fun, because it was, well, some of the most painful TV. We did this thing on the Gravity episode where I had to hang upside down in this harness. And that was one of the most physically painful things I've ever done, because I discovered that those TV harnesses aren't like commercial abseiling harnesses. Commercial ones are comfy. They're like a couch. This thing was like someone smacking on your hip with like a hammer for an hour. So I waddled for about 4 days after that because my hips had been crushed. And, you know, getting hypothermia in a freezer, that kind of wasn't a huge amount of fun. I love making TV, but I don't like being on TV, which is a weird thing. Like, I don't like the public. That bit of it is just not me at all. But it's, you kind of, I live with that because I have no other TV making talents. So that's the only way at the moment that I can do it.